This is pre-algebra lesson 7-8, simple and compound interest. There are lots of vocabulary words here, and they're really important, so take your time when writing these down. The principal, not Mr. Sweeney, is the original amount of money you invest or take out in a loan. So if you invest $5,000 in a company, that would be the principal. If you borrow $10,000 to buy a car, that would be the principal. The interest is the amount of money earned on your money invested or the amount of money owed for a loan. If I borrow $10,000 to buy a car, I have to pay that money back with interest because nobody wants to loan me money just to loan me money. It doesn't happen anymore in this world. Your friends might do it, but in any business needs to have a reason to loan you money, and they loan you money because they get more money back in return. That's why you put money in the bank. You put money in the bank because they'll pay you interest for you putting your money in their bank. The interest rate is the percentage of the balance that an account or investment earns over a fixed period of time. Simple interest is what most bank accounts run on. If I have a savings account, it's going to earn simple interest. It's interest paid only on the principal. Okay? Most car loans are simple interest loans. House loans are simple interest loans. Credit cards are not simple interest loans. Compound interest is interest paid on both the principal and the interest earned in previous interest periods. Okay? If you invest in a good retirement account, they'll pay compound interests. Most savings accounts in banks pay compound interest. They just pay a lower interest rate. All credit cards charge compound interest, which is why you want to avoid credit card debt. The balance is the principal plus the earned interest. Now, this lesson is going to have a lot of things thrown at you at once. Take your time, pause, go back if you need to make sure you're truly understanding this lesson. Let's start with this, simple interest. It's fairly easy to understand, hence why they call it simple interest. When either paying or earning interest, there are two types, simple interest and compound interest. Simple interest is the easiest method to compute, and it's the easiest method to deal with. The formula is in this nice little green box here. Simple interest is the formula I equals PRT. I don't even think I put that up there, so let's put that up there. It's capital I equals PRT, where in that formula, I equals your interest, P equals your principal, R equals your interest rate per year, and T is your time, always converted to years. So let's look at this problem. Suppose you deposit $1,000 in a savings account that earns 6% per year. That's really good interest, by the way. Mine only earns 4%. Find the interest earned in 2 years. Find the total of the principal plus the interest. So you have $1,000. Grandma gave you $1,000 and says, save it for whatever you want when you get older. And you're like, ooh, I want to buy a car. But I'm only 12. Can't buy a car till I get old enough to have a license, so I'm going to put my money in the bank so I can earn the interest so I can buy a better car. So how much money am I going to earn? So in 2 years, when you're 14, how much money are you going to have? Let's look at this. Interest equals principal times rate times time. Okay, I want to find my interest, so I'm looking for I. My principal is the amount of money I invested, which is $1,000. My interest rate is 6%. Remember, we have to always convert percentages to decimals before we can use them. So 6%, if you remember, is 0.06 as a decimal. So we'll put that in there. And my time is 2 years, and time has to be in years, so it's times 2. All we need to do is simply multiply those three numbers together, 1,000 times 0.06 times 2, and we will find that in 2 years, we will make $120. That is our interest. You might say, gee, that's not a lot of money. You just made $120 for doing nothing, for letting your money sit someplace safe and sound where nobody can steal it. That's pretty good money. Now, my total balance then, okay, my balance will be, after 2 years, my balance will be the $1,000 I invested plus the $120 of interest I made, or it will be $1,120. So obviously, the longer you invest your money, the more interest you will earn. All right, let's take a look at a couple more problems about simple interest. Let's say we have a principal of $250. Our interest rate is 4%, and it's 3 years. So interest equals principal times rate times time. So I equals $250, an interest rate at 4%, and my time is 3 years. So 250 times 0.04 times 3. My interest is going to be $30. Not too terribly bad. Simple interest is fairly easy to compute. That's why they call it simple interest. Now what happens if our time is not in years? Well, we should convert it to years. Look at problem number 3. Same amount of principal, different interest rate, and definitely a different time. Same formula, interest equals principal times rate times time. So interest will equal $250. My interest rate is 3.5%, which is 0.055. My time is 6 months. How much of a year is 6 months? Well, 6 months is half a year, and half a year is either 1/2 or 0.5. So I have to multiply it by 0.5 because your time is always put in years, not in months. So if I multiply this out, I will get, you'll look at it and go, that's kind of an interesting number. 4.375. Well, it's money, so we have to round it to the nearest cent. So we look here, look to the right. It's a 5 or greater, so my interest is going to be $4.38. You're like, wow, that's not a whole lot of money. No, not really, but you didn't invest that much money, and you only invested it for 6 months. So in half a year, you're going to earn $4.38. You can buy a couple of things, a couple sodas and a candy bar, maybe. All right. Let's look at compound interest. Compound interest is a bit more complicated. Let's look at this. You deposit $400 in an account that earns 5% interest compounded annually. Once per year means annually. The balance after the first 4 years is $486.20. What is the balance in your account after another 4 years, or a total of 8 years? And we're going to round to the nearest cent. We're going to break this down year by year. So, for the first 4 years, you put $400 in. After 4 years, you earn $486.20. You have $486.20. So in other words, you earned $86.20 of interest in 4 years. Okay. In year 5, you have your $486.20. I'm going to earn 5% interest on that, so I'm going to take my $486.20 and I'm going to multiply it by 0.05. So my interest is going to be $24.31. I'm going to add my $24.31 to $486.20. So at the end of the 5th year, I'm going to have $510.51. So at the beginning of year 6, I'm going to have $510.51. I'm still earning 5% interest, so I'm going to take my $510.51. I'm going to multiply it by 0.05. And that's going to give me 25, it'll always round to the nearest cent. It's going to give me $25.53 worth of interest. So my new balance is going to be $510.51 added to my new interest, which is $25.53. So I'm going to add that. And I'm going to get $536.04. So at the end of 6 years, I have $536.04. So at the beginning of my 7th year, I will have $536.04. I still need to figure out my interest, so $536.04 times 0.05. And that gives me $26.80. So my new balance is going to take $536.04. I'm going to add to that $26.80. And I'm going to have a new balance of $562.84. So at the end of year 7, beginning of year 8, I have $562.84. Again, I have to compute my interest, so I'm going to take my $562.84 and multiply my interest 5%. And that's going to give me $28.14. So I'm going to take my $28.14 and add it to the $562.84 I had, which is going to give me a grand total of $590.98. So after 8 years in the bank, my $400 changed to $590.98. So after 8 years, okay, after 8 years, you have $590.98. As you can clearly see, you had to do that calculation from year to year to year to year, which is a bit annoying. There's got to be an easier way, you might say. Goodness gracious, what happens if I want to know what it is, how much is going to be in my accounts after 20 years, and I don't want to have to do 19 years worth of calculations first? Well, you'll be happy to know there is a formula for this. Okay? You can find your balance using a compound interest in one step with the compound interest formula and a calculator. This is really hard to do without a calculator. It can be done, but boy, is it hard. An interest period is the length of time over which your interest is calculated, and your interest period can be a year or less than a year. Your compound interest formula, again, I don't have it written down, I don't know why, is B equals P, and then you're going to take parentheses here, 1 plus R to the nth power. B is your balance, P is your principal, 1 is 1, R is your interest rate as a decimal, and N is your number of interest periods. Now, interest can be calculated in several ways. If it's compound interest, it can be calculated annually, once a year, semi-annually, twice a year, quarterly, 4 times a year, etc. Here's some of the possible interest periods. Annual is once a year, semi-annual twice a year, quarterly 4 times a year, monthly 12 times a year, daily 360. For some reason they give you 5 days off. Think of them as holidays. They don't charge you interest for Christmas, New Year's, Memorial Day, things like that. Easter. So you get a few free holidays. Yay! You don't have to pay interest on holidays. So knowing that, I'm going to show you how to do compound interest. It's a bit more complicated. So let's take a look at some compound interest problems. Now remember, you have to use the parentheses on your calculator when evaluating the compound interest formula. What I write on the board is exactly what you should plug into your calculator. If you cannot come up with the right answer with your particular calculator, come and talk to me personally and I'll show you how to put it in your calculator. So it says find the balance on a deposit of $2,500 that earns 3% interest compounded semi-annually for 4 years. Remember the formula. Balance equals 1 to P, not 1 of P, parentheses, 1 plus R to the N. So we need to know what all these things are. B is balance, that's what we're looking for. P is my principal, so my principal is going to be $2,500, and I always suggest that you do this. My interest rate is 3%, but we're compounding it. It's compounded interest, so we have to look at this for a second. It's compounded interest, right? So it's 3% annually, twice a year. So it's 3% divided by 2 times a year, right? 3% divided by 2 times per year. Okay, so that's going to be 0.03, and we're going to divide that by 2, which means we're really getting, every time we do it, we're getting 1.5% interest. Okay, let's just do this. Hang on. It's 3% divided by 2 is 1.5%. Okay. As a decimal, that's 0.015. So there's our interest rate. Okay. And our N is the number of compoundings. So that's the number of compoundings is, which is twice a year. Okay. 2 times per year. For 4 years. Means 2 times 4, which means 8 times. These are the important things that you need to figure out. Principle's easy. Interest rate, you always take your percentage and divide it by how many times per year. Semi-annually means twice a year. So we're going to take our interest rate and divide it by 2. Our number of compoundings means how many times per year are you compounding it times how many years are you doing it for? Then you can plug it into the formula. So here's our formula. My balance will equal 2,500 parentheses 1 plus my interest rate, which is 0.015, taken to the number of compoundings, which is 8, taken to the 8th power. Some of your calculators, you can plug in exactly what I just wrote, except for the b, and it'll compute your answer right there. Others of you are going to have to do 1 plus 0.015 first, take that to the 8th power second, and then multiply that by 2,500. If you can't get the answer that I arrive at when we're done here, make sure you come and ask me personally about how to use your calculator, why you should be using your own calculator. If I calculate this out, I will get 2816.231466. Obviously, we're going to round this to the nearest cent. So $2,816.23. My balance after 4 years will be $2,816.23. Okay? That's how you find the balance for this particular problem. These problems can be a little difficult until you understand how to figure out the interest rate and how to figure out the number of compoundings. Once you figure out that, then it's how do you use your calculator. Let's take a look at 2 more examples. Find the balance for your account. Okay, we're going to look at our account here. Okay. I want to find the balance for my account. I'm going to deposit $900. Annual interest is 2% times 3 years. We're going to compound it annually, and we're going to compound it monthly. And we're going to look at the difference between how these formulas are used. Remember, the formula is B equals P parentheses 1 plus R to the n power. So in part A here, P is $900. Okay. Interest rate, 2%, divided by 1, because it's once per year, which means it's 2%, which has a decimal, is 0.02. My number of compoundings is once a year for 3 years, which means 1 times 3, or 3. Right, so if I looked at this problem, let me go back up here a little bit, my balance then, B will equal 900 parentheses 1 plus my interest rate, 0.02, compounded for 3 years. If I multiply all that out, I'm going to get, my balance will be $955 and 0.0872, so to the nearest dollar, $955, excuse me, to the nearest cent, and 9 cents. So that's my balance if I compounded it annually for 3 years. Let's look at it. Same amount of money, but now we're going to deposit it monthly. So, okay, let's just draw a little line here so we can see the difference between our 2 problems. Okay, my principal is still $900. My interest rate now is still 2%, but it's 2% divided by 12. We're going to do it 12 times, which means it's going to be, okay, this is going to be a really interesting looking decimal, so don't let it confuse you a little bit. But you're going to do it monthly, so you've got 2%, okay, divided by 12, which means it's going to be 0.16 repeating percent, okay, which really means 0.16666. As a decimal, that means 0.00166 repeating. A number of compoundings, 12 times per year for 3 years, right? 3 years, yep, 3 years. It was 12 times 36. Oh, excuse me, 12 times 3, which is 36. So my number of compoundings is 36. So the equation for this would look like this. My balance will equal my principal times 1 plus my interest rate, which is 0.001666, put in a few of those, to the 36th power. If you're not using a scientific calculator, you might find your calculator can't handle all these digits. If I do this, 900 times 1 plus 0.0016 to the 36th power, I am going to get a nice long number. B equals 955.604945. So to the nearest cent, $955.60. Let's compare. We didn't make a lot more difference, did we? You look at it and go, I only made 51 cents more compounding monthly versus annually. Okay, so you made 51 cents more. But if you had a large amount of money and the interest rate was slightly larger, you would compound even faster. And before you know it, could you imagine compounding daily, which is what credit cards do? Credit cards compound daily, which means that's why the interest rates can get, sometimes people can have such a high interest rate that they have a monthly payment of $500, and of that $500, only $100 is taking off the principal because the rest of it's paying all the interest. So interest can hurt you. If you're in debt, it hurts you. If it's your money that you put into the bank, you'll love it. And remember, if you can't understand how to put this into your calculator, at least write down the steps, and I'll help you learn how to do it with your calculator. Compounding interest is a little bit more complicated, but actually, once you understand the process, it's not so bad.